Hi, it's me, Sasa. Welcome back again to my channel. Um, I wanted to share with you guys the craziest conspiracy theory that's going on right now in Rwanda. For the last 2 years, since about February 2020, um, shortly at the start of COVID, after a famous singer named Kizito Mihigo died, the president kind of went MIA. Uh, and people have been teasing him. He's become president of the album, the president of the album, or president of pictures and videos, because he hasn't been seen anywhere public, like to Rwandan citizens. And so there's this crazy conspiracy theory that started up that he's dead, that he has died, or he is either really sick and palliative and hidden away somewhere, and that he's actually been replaced. So Kagame has a famous body double called Tom the Hero, and he's like half his age. He looks like late 20s, and he does really good impression of Kagame. So some people, some Rwandans think that's him impersonating the president. Uh, Other people think it's other older people in the government but wearing masks of Kagame. It's such a wild rumor though, and conspiracy theory, because uh, in the pictures and the slides, these have been public appearances that Kagame has gone to. So it wouldn't make sense for all of this to be a body double or a mask. But he has acted out uncharacteristically. The president, Paul Kagame, loved loved the limelight. He loved to travel overseas. In the last 2 years, granted, last 2 years have been COVID, but especially in 2021, his traveling has decreased in comparison to, for example, the year of 2019 or 2018. And so this rumor that he's passed away has actually it's progressed and it's grown. Members of the opposition are sort of fighting in between themselves on what's going on. There is one side that says there's clear indications based on how the country is running that there's no leader. And if you do look at what's going on in the country, there's very little order. Violence by the state has increased, repression has increased, and it's just out of Kagame's style. Kagame's government was much more smoother. He was much better at hiding war crimes and crimes against humanity. Um, but then I think by the end of this year, I started having doubts. I remember the first person who really made, there was three people, I believe, who made this rumor really big. The first one was a man by the name Thomas Nahimana. He's actually he's actually the leader of a government in exile. He is the president of that government, and he is a previous priest who has left the priesthood in order um, to try and lead Rwanda, you know, somewhere, because where it is right now is hell. So he claims that he has information, or was told that Paul Kagame had passed from some sort of brain cancer. But regardless, he says whether or not Paul Kagame is alive, the government, the way it's running, symbolizes that there is no leadership. So that's his argument, and he argues that a new government is needed, one that actually takes care of the people. Another person was a woman. Her name was Yvonne Idamanje. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that name. I'm probably butchering it. But she's a genocide survivor. Um, she's about 42 years old. And she made a couple videos playing to the president for help. Because during the lockdowns of COVID, Rwanda had it pretty rough. Um, they locked down people without any access to food. So for the first couple weeks, it was really disorganized, and the local, because Rwanda is a military state, so at each level there's a lot of policing. You have local police, and then you have federal police. So there are these local police called DASA, and they are famous for their violence, for beating citizens, etc., etc. And during the lockdown, they were exceptionally brutal. And she gave an example, for example, of a pregnant woman who, her and her husband, um, got into the car after hours and decided to drive to the hospital, and just the treatment from their home to the hospital was absurd. They had to go past like checkpoints. They had to pay. They had to bribe. They have to bribe those local policemen. So she was just asking for a bit of dignity and kindness during the pandemic. Um, and she was asking the state to provide food to the needy, etc., etc. But then at the end of her speech, she mentions that she saw Kagame's corpse and that she believes he's dead. And so, for a lot of people, I feel like that discredited her other points, and they started not quite making fun of her, but not taking her as seriously. But she kept on making her videos. But then the government brought her in, and she was arrested. They claimed that she was inciting violence, because at one point she said, we need to all go to the presidential palace and ask to see the president in person and demand that he's, accountable to the people. So whoop, she was swooped, and she was given 15 years she was sentenced to 15 years of prison. She's being held in very inhumane conditions, especially as a woman. Rwanda has this tradition of brutalizing imprisoned women. Idamanje was shackled hands and feet through her period, and she was brave enough to talk about it when she was brought up to the judge, and she spoke about that indignity and how it's not right. So she's sort of become almost a martyr. She's very young, 42. So this is somebody who survived the genocide. She survived the Interahamwe, but could not survive the Inkotanyi. A common story that's with us, but something that has made me not quite a believer. I don't quite believe it, because I saw Kagame, well, not saw him, but he was on video, and he showed up again in pictures at pivotal important points last year. For example, when Mozambique asked the Rwandan defense forces, or the Rwandan army, to come help fight the insurgency, Kagame at one point did show up in person, and he gave a speech to the small battalion of Rwandan troops sent there. And then another prominent place that Kagame visited last year was the late Martha Fred Rwigema Jr.'s daughter's wedding. So this man, Fred Rwigema, he's like the epitome I don't know how to describe him, but he's he's a Tutsi prince that was promised. He is their martyr. He was the founder of the RPF, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, and unfortunately, he lost his life on the second day of the invasion on October 2nd, 1990. His death has a lot of mystery around it, and there's always been rumors about who could possibly have killed him. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, who knows? But it's a very dramatic story actually. But he went to that man's daughter's wedding, threatened her mother, and her grandmother, told them to get their brother back in the country or else. So that was a really odd wedding speech, but it was also really in character. And that's why I was having trouble believing that Kagame could be dead. Some people were saying that the videos and pictures are deep fakes, but at this point, he has pictures with the European Union leaders, Tanzanian president inaugurations. It's a big conspiracy theory. But at the end of the year, when all the party leaders were giving their talks, a previous presidential candidate by the name of Seki Fred Sekikubo Barafinda. He's a politician. His party, I believe, is called Ruda. It's that's an abbreviation, but I don't believe what the full name is. And he's a previous candidate. Didn't quite beat Kagame. And in his Christmas and New Year speech, he asked for a clarification. He said, "We would like to see Tom Dahiro, the impersonator, and we'd like to see Paul Kagame. Bring them in front of the people, put them side by side, and let the people judge." it, it's it was such a ridiculous comment that a competent government with nothing to hide should have laughed and made memes and jokes. But Barafinda was arrested very quickly, the next day, I believe. In the middle of the night, the police did a raid on him. He was arrested and he was shuffled to a mental asylum. So he's arrested there at the moment. We haven't heard much update from him, but it was that reaction. So you have a previous presidential candidate that the government often mocks a lot and tries to belittle. And they've sort of labeled him as crazy, mentally ill. And so he says something that's really crazy. He says something that's literally, it sounds mentally ill. And what does the government do? It arrests him and gives him some sort of credibility. So now the Rwandans are sort of wondering, how good are these deepfakes? Is that Sophia? Is that the robot behind there? And then in 2022, the beginning of this year, the biggest shocking events are happening. Uganda and Rwanda, mortal enemies since Kisangani, 2014 or 2013, whatever it is, they're now best friends or trying to work something out. So, in the political realm, we're wondering what could possibly make Uganda and Rwanda feel that they need to patch things up and strengthen their political, I don't even know what it is, relationship, etc. Many are thinking because Uganda wants to have a hand in the replacement of Kagame, but this conspiracy theory is so deep, is so crazy. I find it very funny. I find it very funny and amusing, and I will keep following it. And I will update the world. Well, actually, probably Al Jazeera, CNN, BBC. It'll let us know whether we're tripping or not. But I want to thank everyone who listens. If you enjoyed my video, please share and subscribe. Thank you very much.